Hey, it's Liz with Big Tex Worms, and today I'm going to talk about worm composting, some summer tips. I know it's the end of May, but here in Texas we're already getting 95 plus degree weather, and I know at other parts like in Florida they're having the same heat already. So I'm going to go ahead and put this out so everybody knows what to do for the summer. Just remember in general that red wiggler worms prefer bin temperatures between 40 and 90 degrees. Now I put bin temperatures just to make you pay attention to that word, because even if the temperature is 110 degrees outside, it is possible to keep your bin temps around 90 degrees. So the inside temperature of the bin is what we're paying attention to. So that's what our goal is, 40 to 90 bin temps. And then the moisture level, we want to keep it around 80%. That's very, very humid. What you do to check that is grab a handful of bedding and squeeze, and you should get a few drops of water out. If you don't get a few drops of water out, you need to moisten more. If you get more than a few drops, if it just pours out of your hand, then you're too wet. So that's how you check the moisture level. Then just a few more tips. Always protect your bin from direct sun. So no direct sun on your bin at any time during the day. You want to make sure that it's protected. And then you want to keep your bin moist, like I said in the last slide, because condensation will help to keep your bin cool. If you're feeding food scraps, you only want to feed in a corner. Do not spread that food out. Don't broadcast feed. Food will heat as it decomposes. So you want to only feed in a corner. That way if it gets really hot in that corner, the worms can escape to the other parts of the bin where it's cooler. If you spread it out and that whole bin gets hot, then your worms could die. In the summertime, when it's above 100 degrees, I don't put any food scraps in my worm bins anymore. Even if it's for a month, I don't put any food scraps in my bins. What I do is I only feed aged compost, aged manure, or paper shreds for those few weeks, because I do not want anything that adds more heat to my bins when it's 113, and it does get that hot. In Texas, we had like 2 weeks of over 105 degrees last summer, so it gets really tricky. But I personally choose not to feed food scraps when it's that hot, just because I don't want to add any more heat. Some other things you might have to consider is if you have your bins in a garage. This is very important that your garage is not closed tight for the day. If it's over 95 degrees outside, your garage can get really stifling. So you must have airflow in the garage. You either need to put a fan up, have an open window, or just crack your garage door open where it's partially open. So there needs to be some airflow to help the condensation happen and help the cooling. I highly suggest that you buy a thermometer to monitor your bin temps. I have a link to one on this page here on the worm bin temperature page on my website, and you could buy one online there, or you can just use a meat thermometer that you purchase at a grocery store, and that'll give you a rough temperature. It won't be quite as accurate as the actual compost thermometers, but in the past, when I'm in a pinch, I use my meat thermometer quite frequently, and they cost around $5 or $8 at the grocery store. Just remember, I have lots of other tips on my website, bigtexworms.com, but I do have one more slide I want to cover real quick, and that's vacation tips. Because we go on vacation in the summertime, right? So the number one thing that people do as a mistake is they'll put a ton of food in their worm bin before they leave, and that is what you absolutely don't want to do. Why? Because of what I said in the earlier slides. Food heats. So if you put a lot of food in the bin, then that means more heat in the bin. So do not overfeed worms to compensate for you being gone. If you're going to be gone during the heat of summer, have someone, and especially if your bin is outside, you want to have someone come by and just sprinkle your bin with water, with like a watering can or a spray bottle. But have them come over and show them how much water to add, because we don't want our bins to dry out. And since I said don't overfeed, you're like, well, what do I feed the worms? Well, you feed them 2 to 3 inches of paper shreds, and they'll munch on those paper shreds for that until you get back. I mean, that could sustain them for up to like a month, the 2 to 3 inches of paper shreds. And they will just go through your worm bin and they'll reprocess what they've already started eating on. So it's better to underfeed during the summer than to overfeed. And whoever's coming over to watch your worms for you or sprinkle your worms with water, remind them or inform them of the rules of worm composting. So tell them not to be feeding food scraps because it'll heat. Tell them not to be digging through the bin and handling the worms because it'll stress them out. And in the heat of the summer, you don't want to stress them out. And make sure they're not going to move the bin into direct sun. So I hope you enjoyed this little tutorial on summer tips for worm composting, and don't forget to visit my website bigtexworms.com for more tips. I also have an online class if this is your first time to see one of my videos. I have an online worm composting class if you are interested in learning more about worm composting. Happy worming, everybody.